The forest was a cathedral of glass and silence. Every tree shimmered faintly, its trunk translucent and veined with light, as if the planet itself were breathing through crystal lungs. Corporal David Holt lay prone among the moss, his body perfectly still beneath a ghillie suit streaked with moisture and fragments of green. The smell of damp soil filled his mask. He could feel the faint tremor of his heartbeat against the cold stock of his rifle. Out here, on Virel Prime, even a breath could betray him. He adjusted the scope with care, one gloved hand turning the dial in precise half movements. The weapon hummed softly, a low current of power waiting for purpose. Holt inhaled once, deeply, then released it in silence. The mantra followed automatically, a thought older than fear. One breath, one death. He had been in position for 9 hours. That wasn't unusual. Waiting was part of the work, an art as much as a necessity. The mission was simple on paper. Identify and eliminate the hostile sniper believed to be responsible for 3 confirmed kills during reconnaissance. In practice, nothing about this place was simple. The crystalline canopy refracted heat signatures, and the constant bioluminescent mist played havoc with sensors. Visibility changed with every gust of wind. Out here, the forest itself was a living defense system. But the kills had been clean, distant, deliberate. Someone, or something, out there understood the craft. "Command, this is Shadow 3. Holt whispered into the throat mic, his voice a faint vibration. No visual. Suspect's range estimated at 1 click, east by northeast. Requesting infrared overlay. Staticist, briefly before command replied, the voice flat and sterile. Negative, Shadow 3. Thermal imaging unreliable. Maintain observation and report movement. You're our only eye on this grid. That was military talk for you're on your own. Holt didn't mind. You prefer it that way. Solitude sharpened focus. The world narrowed to a line, a scope, a target. Yet even through the layers of discipline, fatigue gnawed at him. His shoulder itched beneath the suit. His eyes burned from the constant strain of magnified vision. He ignored both. Discomfort was irrelevant. What mattered was patience. And patience was something humans had learned to weaponize long before railguns and drones. He checked the environment again. Wind, light, sound, all variables he cataloged in the quiet spaces between breaths. A single movement could collapse hours of preparation. Snipers weren't defined by their kills, but by the moments they chose not to take them. Holt's gaze drifted to the horizon, where shafts of blue light filtered through the mist. The alien sun was dimmer than Earth's, colder, and everything it touched seemed carved from glass. It was beautiful, in a way he didn't have words for. Beautiful and utterly hostile. Then the forest changed. A flicker of motion, barely perceptible, rippled through the refracted light. Holt froze, instinct overriding thought. His hand tightened around the rifle grip. Through the scope, he adjusted focus incrementally until the shapes resolved. A distortion, not quite visible yet undeniably there. The pattern of light bent wrong. The way heat shimmered above desert asphalt. He followed the ripple as it moved from tree to tree. Too smooth to be natural. He exhaled, steady and slow, letting the crosshairs follow. The shimmer paused beside a fallen trunk, and for a fraction of a second, the camouflage faltered. The figure came into view. It was humanoid, tall and slender, wrapped in something that seemed alive, an armor that shifted hues to mimic the environment. For eyes gleamed faintly beneath the folds of its hood, aligned vertically down a narrow face. The weapon it carried was long, seamless, organic in design. The alien moved with deliberate grace, its posture neither cautious nor afraid. It was a hunter, and Holt understood it immediately, not as an enemy, but as a counterpart. He adjusted his aim. Distance, 998 meters. Wind, negligible. Line of sight, partial. The alien knelt, scanning the horizon through its own scope. Holt felt the uncanny sensation of symmetry. 2 predators occupying the same silence, unaware and aware all at once. Ghost, his small reconnaissance drone, flickered on his HUD. Energy fluctuation detected. Probable weapon discharge pattern. the text displayed silently. Holt blinked to dismiss the warning. Any movement from the drone risked giving him away, and at this range, one mistake meant death. The alien turned its head slightly, and for the briefest moment, Holt thought its gaze aligned perfectly with his own. Through glass and scope, through distance and silence, their eyes met. A shiver crept down his spine. The forest, the mission, the noise, all of it seemed to dissolve until only that connection remained. There was no malice in its expression, only recognition. It knew he was there. The knowledge was both terrifying and exhilarating. Holt's breath steadied, heart rate slowing as training took control. He adjusted the bipod, compensating for angle and refraction. The alien's weapon twitched minutely, mirroring his own preparation. Two professionals reading each other's intent, predicting motion before it began. Contact confirmed. He whispered, though there was no need to speak it aloud. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Engaging on signal. No reply came from command. There was only the faint hum of the wind brushing over glass. Holt swallowed the dryness in his throat and pressed his cheek against the stock. Every detail sharpened. The texture of the trigger, the pulse in his temple, the faint creak of his armor as he exhaled. A leaf drifted between them, gliding through the refracted air. In that instant, Holt knew the next breath would decide everything. He felt the forest watching, holding its voice in suspense. The alien tilted its head, raising its weapon with that same calm inevitability. There was no room for doubt now. Holt's finger brushed the trigger. His lips barely moved as he spoke the words again, softer this time, almost reverent. One breath, one death. He inhaled, the world collapsing to a single point. Across 1,000 meters of alien wilderness, another being did the same. And as both hunters settled into their final breath, the first hint of wind stirred the moss between them, carrying the scent of ozone and glass, a signal that the duel had already begun. The first second vanished in silence. Holt's finger brushed the trigger pad, the weapon humming faintly as its magnetic coils charged. Across the valley of mist and glass, the alien moved with the same economy of motion, its four eyes adjusting independently, analyzing wind vectors, light refraction, and temperature flux. Neither fired. Patience was part of the kill. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, suspended between two acts of will. At the 5th second, Holt shifted his cheek a millimeter along the rifle's frame, aligning for the subtle updraft created by the planet's uneven thermal layers. He imagined the alien doing the same. Ghost feed flickered once, and then failed, static poured across his visor. The signal jammer had gone live. He was alone now, stripped of every advantage except instinct. Holt didn't curse. He'd expected this. A sniper stripped of tools revealed what they truly were. He focused on the mantra that kept his hands steady. Breathe. Align. Release. By the 7th second, his mind had emptied of everything except calculation. He felt the recoil before it came, the pull of muscle memory guiding thought. He imagined the alien's perspective, wondered if those four eyes saw him as prey or rival. Through the scope, the shimmer moved again, ghost-like between trees. Holt tracked it, slowly, deliberately, waiting for a break in the crystal trunks. The distortion paused. He fired. The railgun released a burst of kinetic energy, so fast it tore the air apart, the slug whistling into the distance with a sound like a collapsing star. The recoil slammed against his shoulder, muted but immense. A half-second later, the alien's weapon flared, a streak of blue-white light slicing through the mist. 2 shots in the same heartbeat. Shards of molten glass exploded around Holt's position. One fragment cut across his glove, searing through fabric and flesh. He rolled instinctively, moving 3 meters to a new angle. The alien's plasma beam scorched the moss where he had been, burning it to black ash. He didn't stop to look. Movement meant survival. Stillness meant target. At 12 seconds, he reloaded with mechanical precision. A hiss of cooling air whispered from the rifle's chamber. His shoulder ached, blood trickling between his fingers, but pain was information, not distraction. He adjusted his optic to short-range thermal. The alien's form was gone, replaced by faint heat residue along the crystalline bark. Either it had moved or learned to mask its thermal signature. Holt admired that. Only professionals adapted mid-engagement. He thought of the soldiers who died earlier that day. He hadn't known their names well, only their voices on comms, but he remembered the panic in their tones when the first beam had cut through their squad. Those men had been infantry, open targets. He, however, was the answer to that ambush. That was why he remained breathing. The mission wasn't vengeance, it was balance. By the 15th second, a faint pulse shimmered at the edge of his scope. There, the alien had repositioned. Elevated ground, partial cover, same line of sight he would have chosen. It was mirroring him again. The realization almost made him laugh. Two minds solving the same equation from opposite sides. The only variable was who broke concentration first. The alien fired. The beam passed close enough to melt part of his barrel shroud. The smell of scorched polymer filled the air. Holt exhaled, adjusted 1 degree down, and returned fire. His slug shattered the crystal trunk shielding the alien. For an instant, he saw the creature clearly, pale skin like burnished stone, for eyes narrowing in focus. The second slug followed, punching through the splintered barrier. The alien dropped, but not dead. Its weapon arm twitched, recalibrating, charging again. Holt's visor flickered as his power core strained from rapid discharge. He ejected the spent pack, sliding a new one home with a click. The sound seemed deafening in the silence that followed. He had 5 seconds left. Enough time for one perfect shot. He steadied himself, drawing one slow breath. His shoulder throbbed, his gloves slick with blood, but his eyes remained steady. Across the distance, the alien stood again, weapon raised. One of its upper eyes was dark, damaged by debris or bullet, he couldn't tell. Yet there was no fear in its stance, only precision. They were two artisans, each intent on completing a single flawless stroke. 18 seconds. Holt felt his heart rate drop deliberately, a trick learned long ago in training. Slow the pulse, extend control. His perception stretched until every sound seemed magnified. The hum of his rifle, the faint crackle of energy from the alien's weapon, even the distant trickle of water through moss. He saw everything with clarity, so sharp it hurt. 19 seconds. Both weapons fired. The shots crossed midair, invisible lines of death intersecting. The alien's beam grazed a shoulder, burning through armor and flesh, the pain instant and bright. Holt's slug met its mark, clean through the alien's skull, between the two central eyes. The creature's body convulsed once, then fell backward into the moss, weapon extinguished. The 20th second ended with silence. Holt stayed still for another full minute, breath shallow, eyes locked on the fallen figure. No movement, no trick, only the faint, rhythmic flicker of the forest returning to calm. He lowered his rifle slowly, muscles trembling from tension more than injury. Smoke curled from the scorched ground around him. The battle had lasted no longer than a breath, yet it felt like years compressed into seconds. He crawled forward, careful and methodical, until he reached a vantage point with a clear view of the alien's body. It lay twisted among the moss, one hand still gripping the weapon. There was a strange dignity in its posture, as if it had fallen mid-prayer. Holt's gaze lingered on the face, for eyes half open, expression unreadable. He exhaled once more, the mantra rising unbidden from habit rather than pride. One breath, one death. The words felt heavier now, not a triumph but an acknowledgement. The duel had ended, but its echo would remain with him. He pressed a hand to his shoulder wound, feeling the pulse of his own heartbeat beneath scorched armor. The air smelled of ozone and iron. Around him, the alien forest resumed its indifferent rhythm, as though nothing significant had happened. Yet Holt knew something had. This kill was different. This one had looked back. He gathered his rifle, reloaded automatically, and scanned the horizon. The mission was complete, but unease replaced satisfaction. Somewhere beyond the ridge, something metallic reflected sunlight. Maybe another sniper, Maybe the alien's command unit. He couldn't tell. He only knew the duel wasn't over in his mind. He took one more measured breath, steadied himself, and began to move toward the fallen enemy. Not as a soldier claiming victory, but as a man seeking to understand what kind of foe he had just killed. The body lay among the moss like a fallen sculpture, still glimmering faintly beneath the pale light filtering through the crystalline canopy. Holt approached with the slow caution of a man who had learned not to trust silence. His shoulder throbbed with every step, but pain grounded him. It was proof that he was still breathing. He stopped a meter away, lowering his rifle and letting his gaze settle on the alien's face. Death had not erased its intensity. Even in stillness, the creature seemed aware, its remaining eyes reflecting fragments of green and glass. He crouched beside it, studying the weapon clutched in its hand. The design fascinated him, organic, elegant, utterly foreign. The energy chamber pulsed weakly, as if unwilling to acknowledge its master's end. Holt touched the side of the rifle, and the pulse ceased, as though recognizing defeat. He felt an unexpected pang of respect. The alien had fought with discipline, precision, and an understanding of patience that few humans possessed. It hadn't been a monster. It had been a mirror. He activated his comms. "Command, this is Shadow 3. Target neutralized." "Repeat, target neutralized." Static answered him. Then a clipped voice broke through, distant and detached. "Confirmed, Shadow 3. Hold position for retrieval and debrief." "Copy," he said, though his tone was empty. Retrieval meant a cleanup crew, not a funeral. They'd take samples, strip the tech, file it under xenobiological warfare. He looked back at the alien and felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle over him. He had ended a life without understanding it. He glanced at the device mounted to the creature's chest, small, hexagonal, with glowing runes shifting like liquid light. It emitted a soft rhythm, a recorded pulse. Carefully, he detached it and activated his visor's translator. The device projected faint sounds, clicks, and hums that slowly formed into something almost human, a voice, low and calm. "We came to learn from the hunters of Earth," the translation whispered, "to understand how the fragile make death precise." Holt froze. The words didn't sound like conquest. They sounded like admiration, or perhaps curiosity. His stomach turned cold. This hadn't been an invasion. It had been an observation, a study, and he had just executed the researcher. He sat back, staring into the forest as realization crept through him. Humanity's violence had drawn attention again, and he had confirmed every fear they might have held about his species. He shut off the device and sat in silence. The forest buzzed faintly, alive again now that the tension of battle had dissipated. Overhead, shafts of light pierced the canopy, illuminating particles of dust and pollen that drifted lazily through the air. Holt felt the weight of his rifle in his hands, suddenly more burden than tool. He had defined his existence by precision, by the clean efficiency of the kill. But now, as he looked at the alien's body, that clarity blurred. If they had come seeking understanding, what had he just taught them? Minutes passed before he stood. His shoulder burned as he slung his rifle across his back. He scanned the ridge where the alien ship had been hovering hours before. It was still there, faintly visible through the clouds, a silent witness to what had occurred. He wondered if others were watching, recording, analyzing his every move. Perhaps they were already deciding what lesson they had learned from humanity's deadliest representative. He toggled the comm again. "Command, requesting scientific personnel for recovery. The target carries non-aggressive tech. Possible diplomatic data." There was a pause, then a weary voice replied, "Negative. Maintain perimeter. Intel team will assess when secure." Bureaucratic indifference. He could almost hear the unspoken calculation. Threat neutralized, situation contained, mission complete. Holt exhaled slowly, shutting off the channel. Orders were necessary in war, but this didn't feel like war. It felt like a conversation that had ended before it began. He returned to the body and began to dig. His knife was clumsy in the moss, but he worked with determination. He wasn't sure why. Ritual, respect, maybe guilt. The soil beneath was soft, dark, almost black. When the hollow was deep enough, he lifted the alien's form into it, careful not to disturb the weapon. As he covered it with earth and moss, he found himself murmuring the words his father had once said over fallen comrades. "Rest easy. The fight's done." When the grave was finished, he placed a single rail slug atop it, polished and gleaming. The bullet caught the light and flashed once like a signal. He hesitated, then reactivated the alien's device and played the last recorded words again. The voice repeated its message, quiet and almost reverent. Holt stood there, translating it one final time in his mind. Not a declaration, but an offering. They came to learn. He whispered, "Maybe we both did." The forest answered only with wind. Holt turned his eyes skyward. The alien ship had begun to move, drifting slowly toward the horizon. It did not descend for vengeance or retaliation. Instead, it climbed, its hull reflecting sunlight until it vanished into the upper atmosphere. He wondered what report would reach their world, how they would describe the human sniper who responded to curiosity with a bullet. The thought settled heavily in his chest. He collected his rifle, checked his systems, and started toward the extraction point. Each step echoed softly on the moss. His wound ached, his muscles trembled, but he felt no triumph, no relief. Behind him, the forest closed over the grave, as if erasing evidence that the duel had ever happened. Halfway through the valley, he stopped and looked back one last time. A beam of light pierced the canopy, falling directly upon the mound of earth. It shimmered faintly, the moss pulsing with residual bioluminescence. For an instant, he imagined the alien's 4 eyes opening again. Not an accusation, but an understanding. The image stayed with him as he resumed his march. When the extraction beacon pulsed on his wrist display, he keyed in his final report. Target neutralized. No further hostiles. Recommend reclassification. Encounter, not engagement. They weren't invading. They were learning. He hesitated before sending it, knowing the words would be dismissed or redacted. Still, he sent them. Some truths deserve to be recorded, even if ignored. As the transport's thrusters roared in the distance, Holt took one last breath of the alien air. It smelled sharp and clean, untouched by war. He thought of the phrase that had defined his life, the one he had whispered before every shot. This time, it felt different on his tongue, less a creed, more a lament. One breath, he murmured, one death. Then he added softly, and sometimes one understanding too late. The wind carried the words away as he walked toward the rising dust of the incoming transport, leaving behind the quiet forest and a lesson it had given him, one he would carry longer than the scar on his shoulder.